In this video, we're going to talk about policies governments can enact to protect their own citizens from consequences of free trade. So we'll have to start out with some terminology. Protectionism is a preference for policies that may limit trade in order to help individuals within your country borders. Trade liberalization is policies and actions that reduce trade restrictions, so they promote free trade. Tariff is a tax on imported goods, and an embargo is a restriction or prohibition of trade in order to put political pressure on a country. So it's just not allowing trade from a country due to political reasons. So back to our story from the last video, the European chicken farmers wanted to enact some protectionist policies and impose tariffs on the United States imported chicken in order to regenerate the producer surplus they lost. So remember, we had a producer surplus up here at $2. We had this entire triangle for European chicken farmers, and then United States chicken farmers had increased world supply of chickens so much that it reduced our producer surplus down to this little triangle here at $1. Okay, so they want to increase their producer surplus because they had lost so much due to the increased supply of chicken. So let's take a look at France in particular, who went ahead and went forward with a tariff to benefit chicken farmers in their own country. So in France, the world price of chicken had fallen to $1. So people in France, the consumers in France, were enjoying this decrease in the price of chicken. And many consumers in France were enjoying more chicken at the price of $1. But the producers of chicken in France were getting a lot less producer surplus. Okay, so they want to increase the price of chicken so they can collect more producer surplus. And the government was all too happy to do this. They enacted a 25% tariff on chicken imported from the United States. And what happens when they enact this 25% tariff is that the price of chicken increases by 25%. So here's a little bit bigger graph. We can see here is deadweight loss, right? So we have these two triangles, both are a quarter and both are a quarter high and 10 wide. So 1/2 times 10 is 5, times a quarter is 1.25, and we have two of those. So we have 2.5 is our deadweight loss. And then we have a rectangle here, which is from 50 to 110, so that's 60 times a quarter. So a quarter of 60 is 15. So in this case, the French government made $15, or 15, we'll say these are thousands of chickens, so $15,000 on this tariff. And producer surplus has increased from this triangle here that went up to $1 to this triangle here that goes up to $1.25. And consumer surplus lost everything in this area. All right, so let's test your knowledge here a little bit. How much tax revenue would be generated from a 50-cent tariff in the market below? So here we have producer surplus goes all the way up here to 2.5, and since we are above the equilibrium price, right, in the world market, that means we are exporting this good. So how much tax revenue is going to be generated from a 50-cent tariff in this market? That's right, $0, right? We are exporting this good. So if we put a tariff on it, a tariff is a tax on imports. Since the price, the world price, is above our market price, that means we're exporting, which means we would not be importing any of this good. Since we're not importing, a tax on imports is going to have no effect on the market. So we will earn $0 in tax revenue from this tax. Okay. A tariff on a good the country is exporting will not have any effect on the market. A tax on imports will not generate any revenue if there are no imports. Okay, so we're exporting because the world price is above our market price. So there will be no tax revenue if we tax imports on our products that we're exporting. If we go back to the chicken tax, Germany was actually the largest consumer of United States chicken to enact the chicken tax. And Volkswagen had become a large part of the United States auto market in the early 60s. Okay? So we had Beetles and Bugs, but there were also BMWs and Porsches and Mercedes were all part of the United States auto market and growing parts in the early 60s. In response to the tariff on United States poultry, Lyndon B. Johnson enacted what became known as the chicken tax. So we started to tax things like cornstarch, potato starch, and brandies and other whiskeys. But most importantly, we taxed the heck out of trucks. And all these taxes are still in place today. Robert Z. Lawrence has been quoted as saying the chicken tax crippled the U.S. automotive industry for years by insulating it from real competition in light trucks for 40 years. And as you can see, here's pictures of the new Silverado, the new Ford F-150, and the new Dodge Ram. And as you can tell, they all look very similar, right? These are all full cab versions of basically the same truck, right? So the truck market has kind of been crippled by the chicken tax. Quick quiz question again here. The chicken tax can best be described as protectionism, a quota, an embargo, or trade liberalization. Right, it's protectionism. It's a tax on goods in order to protect local producers. Another restriction on trade that is typically imposed by countries with large economies is quotas. A quota is just a limit on the amount of a particular good that can be imported or exported. So another example here, an example of a quota. In the 70s, the United States enacted quota on a lot of clothing articles. And they were in place for about 25 years until 2005 with the multi-fiber agreement. So without quotas, here's the market for things like blue jeans. Okay, so blue jeans world price is about $20, but the United States set a quota on the amount of blue jeans that we could import. Okay, and quotas increase the price of the good, just like tariffs, but instead of this area being green and being a tax revenue, the quota rents typically go to the exporting country. So whoever we're buying the blue jeans from is going to make more money on the blue jeans because we're going to charge $30 for the blue jeans because we can't import as much, right? So if we set a quota, we're setting a limit on how many blue jeans we can import, which is going to restrict supply. And you can see that here in just the movement up of the price, right? If we restrict the amount of blue jeans we can import to 5,000 instead of 10,000, then we're going to import less, and the supply in the United States will remain the same. So since we can only import this many, we're just going to move up the supply curve here, and we will end up with a price of 30. So instead of this area going to the home country when it would apply a tariff, it goes to the country which is selling the blue jeans during a quota. And we still have the same deadweight loss on both sides and the same increase in producer surplus, but instead of earning a tax revenue, we're just giving this revenue to the exporting country. The last restriction on trade that I want to talk about in this class is embargoes. Embargoes are usually used to put political pressure on a country. So during the Cold War, the United States enacted an embargo on Cuba that was just recently lifted. So things like Cuban cigars could not be imported to the United States until, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. But more recently, the United Nations passed a weapons embargo against North Korea, which keeps members of the UN from trading arms with North Korea. Embargoes are really just used to restrict trade from a country to kind of put political pressure on them, to make them want to change the way that they're running their country. So, in summary, both tariffs and quotas are protectionist policies that can be used to increase the producer surplus in the home country. And though it can seem like a good short-term solution, long-term this is likely not really beneficial to society because you're reducing total surplus. If producer surplus is lost from free trade, the producers who are cut out of the market should end up joining a different market where they have a lower opportunity cost. So instead of farming chicken, for example, you could shift and become a pork farmer or a cow farmer, right? And Germany may have been better off in their chicken farmers becoming pig farmers, brewmasters, or car manufacturers, right? Shift to somewhere where you have a lower opportunity cost rather than forcing the government to solve things for you.